an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering Veronica Mars, Season 3, Episode 9, Spit and Eggs. In this episode, I don't know why it's called that, guys. Can anybody help me out? I hate that name. It's just real gross. Everything about it is gross. But this episode was pretty good. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everyone. I am Natasha. Thank you very much to Agnes for commissioning this episode. And thank you very much to Rachel, who commissioned the live watch of this episode. I can really understand now why she was so eager to get in a live watch. This was a very eventful episode, and I am pretty pleased at the fact that it looks like the rape storyline is pretty much over and done with. Now, first of all, two things. I was really, really concerned at the end of the previous episode that it almost seemed like the show was implying none of the rapes actually happened. And as we see this episode, that is not the case. It seems like a couple of them were faked, but there were definitely actual rapes that they were just sort of imitating. So in a way that's reassuring, knowing that it wasn't completely fabricated, but also it's just, this is one of those things where I just want to kind of count my blessings that maybe the rape storyline is done with, because it's a combination of things. First of all, the stereotypical feminazis are really rough. This episode, we have them egging the dean's car. And I think we're supposed to wonder if maybe one of them was responsible for his death, because spoilers, he turns up dead at the end of the episode. Bullet right through the side of the head. On the other hand, Mercer being the guilty one isn't super satisfying because we don't know Mercer, I think that was probably the toughest part about pulling off this storyline, is that in the first two seasons, we are so deeply enmeshed with the characters affected by the mystery. We start off the school year, Veronica is really struggling with depression and feeling alienated from everybody. She, was a victim of a rape, and she hasn't even told anyone what happened. Her best friend was murdered, and her boyfriend, there's this whole distance happening there. There are all of these major players that are so close to the person affected, and it makes the stakes feel very high. And they just can't really pull that off this season when we have up and moved all of the characters from the high school into a college. They have brought as many of the characters as they can along for the ride, but it isn't going to be the same when we're trying to also mix in some new people. That said, I think a lot of you are going to hate me for this. I'll tell you what I was starting to suspect, and it turns out I was wrong, and I'm glad I was wrong, but I still was suspecting it. I was wondering if they were setting Piz up to be the rapist, because he was somebody that we had kind of gotten to know and started to trust. And there has been a frustrated aspect to him this season based on the fact that he's been interested in Veronica clearly. And I'm wondering if, he's being set up as the new love interest because now she's single. I think having Mercer be the one who's guilty might make sense in its way, but it doesn't have the same like gut punch to it that, and honestly, it's not surprising that they kind of fucked this up, because clearly the writers do not really understand feminists or rape culture. So the reason that I kind of would have liked for Piz to be the one is that rapists are people that we know and like. Rapists are people that we would otherwise trust. Rapists are people that you would never suspect. And that is why a lot of women don't tell anybody what happened, because they know that nobody will believe them. Mercer genuinely has this mustache twirling fucking monologue about how, you know, you guys would fuck me anyway, but I just don't want to listen to your bullshit, so I'm speeding up the process kind of thing, that I think is extremely missing the point on how most rapists operate. There is a comedy to the way they have him deliver that monologue that feels really misplaced. And I don't feel like the writers understand the psychology behind somebody who does this. And the fact that he was like kind of teamed up with somebody in order for there to be that misdirect, it makes it works for like the way things were happening in the storyline, but it doesn't hold a ton of water for me. The weirdness of Mo being involved. I suspected Mo specifically. Rachel's in the chat. She says, I definitely agree. I think they were planning on having the Arrested Development guy from last season, but he wasn't available. Yeah, so somebody sent me some information, and they mentioned that they had been planning on having Michael Cera come back, and they had been intending for him to be at least involved the way that Mo is, if not the actual perpetrator. And that is what I would have rather liked if Michael Cera, if his character, or if Mo were solely responsible. People who really do seem non-threatening. Because Mercer has this sort of like this arrogant, entitled attitude in everyday life. And I feel like it's just so obvious. And I think it's so important for media to portray people who are otherwise likable as being capable of raping women. Because I just really believe that as a culture, we have this like evil man with a gun or a knife hiding in the bushes waiting for a jogger to run by image in our mind of what a rapist is like. And that is so far the minority. Most of the time, it is a person that a woman trusted, was friends with, sometimes somebody that she was actively dating, and the dude just got impatient and just decided that he was going to take what he wanted and who cares. And so the reveal of it being Mercer, on the one hand, I do kind of like the fact that he was suspected earlier, and it turns out, oh, guess what? It actually is him, because that is unexpected. If we have somebody who we suspected was doing the thing, and it doesn't seem like they were guilty, you sort of write them off mentally. And having them be guilty after all, I do kind of think that's a fun idea. But there are some things that don't add up to me about Mercer. Like, for example, the signal that we get this episode, which it took me a minute. When I was doing the live watch, I sort of rewound, because what happens is Veronica is listening to his supposed radio show that skips. And that is an indication that we're listening to a recording and not a live broadcast, which is allegedly what he always does, which is supposed to be his alibi, right? Except we saw that the radio booth is in an open area near the cafeteria that everybody can look into. How has Mercer been not there this like number of times that these rapes have been committed and nobody has noticed? How has he managed to pull off a recorded episode when they have gone out of their way to show us how visible the studio is? I truly don't understand why they decided to have the studio visible in the first place. I found that to be a really weird feature, but I don't know that my school had like a college radio station. Maybe they did, and I just was not in on that. Maybe that's how some of them are. Maybe they encourage like, you know, being open to the public in terms of like them being somebody you can see. But I just find it to be really odd that they made sure to show us how easy it is to look in and tell who's there. And then they have the whole like alibi circle around him playing a recording every time. I don't understand that. What was he doing? How did nobody notice? This is supposed to be a call-in show. I would assume people are trying to call in because they don't realize that it's a recording and are wondering why they can never get through. Like, I would think that people are hearing this playing and looking over and being like, but there's nobody in there though. I would really think that this wouldn't hold up at all. And I don't know if it's supposed to be that everybody is always at the parties and so nobody is around to notice that he isn't in there, but that's really, really flimsy to me. It doesn't make a lot of sense. I could buy that if it were just people are at parties when he normally records in a regular old closed studio and he gives them the night off to go to the party and pretends he was there and he wasn't. But this is supposed to be an open space where anybody could be going to the cafeteria and accidentally stumbling across this empty booth. And he has no control over whether they're in there or not, you know, unless it's supposed to be that the cafeteria where he would be recording is locked because it's like sort of a late show and it's after hours and nobody is in the cafe. But like in my school, the food counters were locked, but the tables were always out and open and you were still able to sit in the eating area, even if there wasn't actually food being actively served. Anyway, that just like, that particularly puzzled me when we heard the like record scratch during his recording to let us know that it was a recording and not him live. It didn't occur to me that, oh, that means he's out here raping, because all I could think was, didn't anybody see him like duck out of there or anything? Oh, I got very hung up mentally on what I knew about the recording space versus what I was being asked to believe was happening. So that was part of why like that reveal came as a bit more of a surprise to me, was I was still mentally like trying to put the pieces together that I still don't really. And Rachel is saying that's an excellent point. So I'm going to assume that there isn't really an explanation given about that, but also there might be, and Rachel just can't tell me right now because it's a spoiler. I don't know. But maybe we'll find out. I also, the idea of Mo being like, in this position that we're being like sort of shown as parallel to the prison experiment thing where somebody is sort of like, berated into being subservient to another person. It's a weird, it's just a weird complication that for me doesn't really pay off a ton. And I find it not particularly believable that this dude would feel the need to involve Mo at all. I just don't really see that that this involvement of Mo would be necessary. Like, it just feels like the show needed to add this in order to muddle things a little bit. But if we've got Mercer already like with this weird fake radio show, I don't really know, what did he need Mo like First of all, how was this working? Because Mercer was setting it up so that the frat parties were always the same night, so that he had a guaranteed, like, drunk women that he could prey on. And Mo was the one who, like, drove them back to the dorms with that, like, that golf cart thing, right? So okay, thank you. Rachel says Mo was the one who drugged the girls while driving them back to campus. Okay. I guess it's just the sort of thing that, I mean, I guess that works. It's just that it feels so extra, you know? All this to say, the rape storyline overall feels like weirdly overwrought and also totally underbaked. And it's just like they were doing too much in certain areas, and then they just didn't do anything with other things that were ripe with potential and possibility. They didn't think things through enough in terms of like the psychology behind some stuff. And then they went way too far with the execution of a thing. And I think that is partially, again, due to not really understanding how rape works, and the fact that so much of the time you don't need to be super complicated with it, because nobody gives a shit about young women. Nobody gives a shit about women, period. But young women, especially drunk young women, there doesn't, like, we don't need to create all these hoops for a rapist to jump through, because they just don't exist. They don't. It's so easy for guys to get away with this sort of thing that I feel like they overcomplicated it in ways that are not actually how things work. And then throwing in the like weird fake rapes that happen. It just, you know, so overall, I just am relieved it's over. It seems like we're going to be moving on from this. I do appreciate that we kind of get confirmation of the fact that Parker's rape was genuine, because, you know, I wasn't sure what to think after we ended that last episode, and it felt like they were kind of saying none of them were real. The way that this goes down with Veronica being found because of Parker hearing the rape whistle and knowing that some shit is up. I liked that she gets her moment to go head to head with Mercer here. After having that gut reaction to him, and I like that her gut reaction turned out to be correct. In the episode where she has that reaction because of the scent of his cologne, and then we just find, like, you know, a shaver, and I'm like, well, dudes wear cologne and shave. I mean, how many people buy that cologne? I wasn't like, Veronica has really thrown people to the wolves for very little, a couple of times. So I was definitely like, all right, pump the brakes here, girl. That's really circumstantial. Don't do it. But I do like that Parker's gut reaction turns out to be based on something real. And it's like, it feels like there was more there than just the cologne. Even though that's really all the show gave us, I like to see it as she just got a vibe, and there was a sense to her of just like, alarm bells going off, which is something that can happen with people. Unfortunately, it doesn't go off enough, or if it does, we will like tell ourselves to calm down and be quiet. We'll have gut reactions to people that are so correct, but we don't have anything to base it on. And so we will be like, what am I even doing? And we'll tamp it down, and then find out like a year later, oh no, you were right. You were right to feel that way initially, but you just let all of this like intellectual evidence get in the way of what your like lizard brain was trying to tell you. And I also want to know, Veronica, so the whole thing like leading up to this party, Veronica tries to get the frat house to be required to provide these drug testing coasters, which Parker is handing out at this like Take Back the Night booth on the quad. And they have these little circles on them, and you drop a drop of your drink onto it, and if it turns red, it means it's drugged. So Veronica goes to the dean and is like, you should make them be required to hand these out at the door. And the fucking assholes are like, yeah, we'll totally do that. And then they just hand out these like printed ones that have got no chemical reactive properties whatsoever, just to pretend that they're doing something. Super gross. Like, the idea that any girls might be depending on this, unaware that these are absolutely nothing, is so, so infuriating. And Veronica has Mac and Piz and Wallace basically stalking the party, going around, dunking them, the little pieces they've got of each of the coasters in everybody's drinks, trying to keep an eye on everybody as much as they can. And eventually she finds a cup that's positive, that has a girl's name written on the side, and the girl is nowhere to be found. And we find out that the girl's name, I don't remember what it was, but let's say it was like Alicia. Alicia has a younger sister that she like gives her ID to. So Alicia's not here and was never here. Her younger sister had been here and decided to head home. Now, this is the thing that I find confusing, because it turns out that this girl was drugged. But the whole premise is supposed to be that Mo drugs them on the way back to the dorm. So why was she drugged at the party? I didn't think, was Mo at the party? Did he show up there at some point and I missed it? Like, the fact that this girl, Rachel says he was there. Okay. So, again, it doesn't really work. There's no real need for Mo to be here. Like, it again overcomplicates things in a way. Like, I liked the idea that Mo was drugging with this tea that he's obsessed with and always providing tea for, like, that works. And eventually that is a thing with Veronica. But the fact that it's happening at the party, it's just like, I don't know, it's weird. Rachel says he showed up to get a different passed out girl. Right, because there's a girl that has literally like laying in the middle of the floor and her friend just clearly did not give any shits about it. I forgot about that. Yeah, so I don't know. Veronica, she sees this. She decides to like chase down this girl. Already the other guys, including Logan, who is really very in her face about not getting involved in this, they decide that they're going to go after the girl whose name is on the cup because they have not yet figured out that it was actually her younger sister. So they go over there. Veronica figures out it was actually the little sister. And then she does this thing that I can't abide, which is apparently just decides to go in there to thwart Mercer without sending a text to anybody, without calling anybody, without letting anyone know where she's going, what she's doing, what she's planning, nothing. There is no reason for her to handle it like this. She could still go in and take this girl's place and fight Mercer, but have let literally anyone know. And instead, we have this thing where it's like a common thing, not just in this show, but others, where somebody will try and call a person. When that person doesn't respond, they just hang up. Oh, it went to voicemail. They're not answering. Click. Leave a message. Okay? You call Logan, you call Wallace or Piz. Even if they don't answer right away, be like, I'm going to such and such. It was actually her little sister. I'm going to her dorm now, but I'm pretty sure that and I just heard the recording skip. I think it was Mercer. Tell anybody. But they have to set it up so that she's in there by herself, so that somebody can help her and save her and prove Logan wrong for the fact that he thinks she never needs any help. It just undermines the intelligence of Veronica as a character. The idea that she runs into dangerous situations and doesn't always think ahead, I can believe that to a point. But when she's going into a situation like this and she's literally putting herself into the bed of the girl who's going to get assaulted and she's not telling anyone, that I can't buy. I don't believe it. You know? That said, she stabs Mercer in the leg with a unicorn horn, and that was pretty much one of the best attacks that's ever happened on a television show. Mercer being stabbed in the leg is so hilarious. And I didn't realize when he runs into Parker in the hall that the horn was still in his fucking leg. I thought that she stabbed him and yanked it out again, and I was like, oh shit. But then later we see Mo getting it out, and I had no idea it was still in there, which is incredibly fucked up. Like, it must have been jammed into like his bone, his thigh bone. Like, God, my whole body contracted. Ugh. Rachel says, especially after he was ragging on her unicorn collection. Exactly. It's really like, I really like the idea that it's something that's like ultra feminine and seen as sort of like this like delicate, weak thing. And it's used to gore him in the leg. And the fact that she got him in the leg is what really gives credence to Parker confronting him in the hallway. Because we have this moment where, Veronica's blowing the rape whistle. Parker hears it. She stumbles into the hall trying to figure out what's going on. And Mercer is standing there. Now, she already had her suspicions about Mercer. And I think she would have still been like, yeah, something's up with you, you fuck. But convincing other people is a different situation. And her standing there confronting him, and then everybody comes out like, hey, what's going on? And then they see that bleeding wound in his leg. That's going to change everybody's reaction to him and just be like, oh God, what happened here? I forgot what his, like, I think he tries to say that he like got drunk and fell down. I don't remember what his like attempted explanation of it was, but honestly, watching Mo having to like extract the unicorn horn from his leg got me really thinking about my own home security system and that I might want to get a couple of unicorn statues around. Something that won't like shatter like ceramic. I want something made of pewter, something heavy, And I do also really like the fact that Veronica gets trapped in Mo's room and then she opens the window and then ducks back into the closet. I thought that was really smart. I didn't get what was happening at first because there's a strange cut. And I was screen sharing while I was watching this episode, and a couple of people saw what I meant, that it's just like she opens the window, looks around, and then all of a sudden we cut to her somewhere dark with the like light from her phone on her face. And I was like, what just happened? But they just didn't want us to see exactly what she had done right away. And she was luring them into thinking that she had escaped through the window. And it would have worked if it weren't for the fact that her dad calls her back while she's in the closet. Honestly, what I thought was going to happen, she earlier in the episode is talking to Mo before she knows any of this and tells him, if any girl seems to be like super fucked up and in a dangerous position, please call me. And she gives him her number and puts it in his phone. I thought they were going to call her from his phone and it was going to go off, which I like, on the one hand, I think would have been a pretty good payoff to her giving him her number. On the other hand, Mo is sort of unwillingly participating in this, and I don't really see him volunteering the information that he even has her number to Mercer, because I think he's starting to realize at this point that he's in over his head, that Mercer's willing to do something really like fucked up. Like, who knows what he was planning. I don't know if he was going to kill her, threaten her, whatever it was. I think that it's probably, Rachel says, I think it was Mo's phone that she used to call her dad. Oh, what happened to her phone? Did she lose it in her fight? I guess that would make sense. Maybe still in the girls' room. Yeah, maybe. 'Cause she yeah, okay. That's how her dad tracked them down at the motel. Right. Okay. Either way, I really, really enjoy both her father's response and Logan's response. So her dad busts in this bitch with what? He's got like a rifle, a shotgun. He's the avenging angel, and I needed it. This is what I want when if we're going to do a fantastical story about rape, give me this ending of the vengeance that is wreaked. I need this. This is why women get into like true crime shows and stuff where somebody actually gets caught or gets like held responsible. It's just men do not get held responsible for rape, like almost ever. And so we need to go into fiction to get that satisfaction. So I was so appreciative. Keith rolls up in here and basically is like, I would love it if either of you would try and come at me, because I want nothing more than to watch your dead, lifeless body hit the floor. Please. Like, you could just feel it like rolling off him. He's just like, oh, please, please. He doesn't say it, but I just don't think he would be too upset, you know? And then Logan, look, I'm glad they broke up. Honestly, their breakup scene really moved me. Logan is so compassionate, and he's just like, man, I really love you. And I do think that you love me too, but this is clearly not working, and I will be here for you. I still care about you and want to help you, but obviously this is not how this is going to work. And I thought that scene, because, you know, I was sort of worried, okay, clearly they're heading towards a breakup. But I want them to break up so bad. How are they going to get me to give a shit by the time it happens? And the answer is, don't make Logan super bitter. He's obviously a little bitter. You can't have a relationship go sour and people not feel a little bit bitter about it. But it's more that he's grieving. He's not even angry at her. It seems like he's just upset that they can't be compatible. It's just the way they each see the world and want to operate are just, they don't go together. And he seems to just be angry at the universe for the fact that that's how they are both built to function. And it's just not going to change, which relatable. I think we've all been in relationships where we're just like, man, this could have been really good if only a couple things were different. And they're never going to be different. Those are unchangeable things. And I'm so mad because we were so close to really being like solid. And so like the breakup between the two of them actually was sad. It was sad, like, both because you know that Logan genuinely cares about her. You can feel that rolling off him. And in a lot of ways, he had an excellent point. He really, like, he was valid in saying that she needs to accept help. She needs to be a little bit more careful. It's just the way he chose to approach it that was not taking into account who she is as a person. Giving her a bodyguard that she doesn't know about, not great. Just straight up getting in her face and yelling at her not to get involved and keep her nose out of it, not great. I totally get where he's coming from, and he's not even wrong, but it's just the whole approach. He was too emotional about it and trying too hard to keep her from being who she is. So when he actually like tells her, I will be here if you need anything, I just like, that got to me a little bit. So then at the end, he goes and busts up these cops' car with a baseball bat. And guys, I honestly didn't even realize that he was doing it to get thrown in jail. It like clicked way later. I was like, oh, he was doing that on purpose to get arrested. I thought that he just like did that to vent his rage at the fact that the cops were not taking shit seriously. Although that really doesn't make sense in the way that the story was portrayed. And then that he like paid to get into the cell because he's got so much money. And we know that people with money can get in the fuck they want anywhere. I didn't even put it together, the two things, that he busted that car up to get put in the holding cell with these two dudes. And one would really think that this is a small enough community, they would know what he was doing and realize he was Veronica's ex and what had just went down and not put him in there with these guys. However, I could also see them knowing perfectly well what he's doing and being like, oh, yeah, good. Put him in there with them. I will love. We just won't turn the security cameras off real quick, and we just won't pay attention to anything that we hear going on. And the only regret that I have is that the scene cuts away before we get to see what he does. Because I really wanted to see him lay into Mercer. I want him to lay into Mo too, of course. Like, this couldn't have happened without Mo being like as weak and pathetic as he is. But in his way, Mo was also a victim of Mercer. It's a really weird gray area. I think that's part of also what I don't love about adding Mo as a factor is that you do feel sorry for him. And I don't want to feel sorry for anybody involved in this whole thing. I just don't like being given that kind of gray area when it's not usually how this shit goes down. Let's let everybody involved with the rapes of innocent women be a bad guy. Unequivocally, no gray area. Can we just do that? And so, yeah, Mo is despicable, but there's also something really pitiful about him that is just, and I don't want it. Let me just hate him, you know? I don't want to see him getting like smacked around by Mercer, which is what we see eventually. But yeah, the expression on his face when he gets into that cell. Ariel says Logan does good crazy face, and he really does. Like in that scene, I was afraid of him. This is a man who wants blood and fucking clearly feels like he has nothing left to lose in a way. I mean, and what does he have left? Like, he's gone to prison already. Remember? It's just, honestly, I think he would find that to be an acceptable payoff. Even if he like stayed in because he wound up beating the shit out of these guys and got some time, I think he'd just be like, fine, you know? But yeah, I do wish that I got to see it, and I'm curious what Veronica will do when she hears about it, if she ever does. I am assuming that she will. I hope she will. And not that I'm like, oh, I hope she gets back together with, I do not want them together. I like them much better if they are like occasionally teaming up, but not romantically involved. But I do want her to know that he had her back on that kind of level. I think that there's just value there, especially because them not being together anymore makes it almost more valuable, because there's this real like territoriality that guys can have where it's like, I am enraged because she's mine and how dare you. And while I do think that's still obviously in play emotionally, I kind of like that the show has them be split up, and his rage is it feels like whether or not we're together and I'm hurt and feel bad about the way things went, absolutely fucking nobody better mess with you in any way at all, or I will ruin their lives. And that's a nice place to be, to know that a dude, even if you are not his romantic partner, you are still valuable enough to him that he's willing to literally go to jail to get his hands on the people who are about to hurt you or who did hurt you. I like it, you know? I really wonder what Wallace and Piz are going to do. Do we get a look at what's happening with the two of them after this all wraps up? I don't think we do. Wallace gets weirdly like put in the middle of stuff, but then not really dealt with. Like the last episode where there's that fight that breaks out in the cafeteria, and then she gets like carted off by his the secret bodyguard. Wallace is just left in the middle of that fight. Like, she gets lifted out of there just as she's about to go in to defend Wallace, who got decked in the face. And then we start this episode, and there's no mention of the fact that Wallace was like left to fend for himself in this fight that had nothing to do with him. And I would have kind of liked it if he had some, like, a black eye or anything to sort of indicate the fact that he just saw some shit. He just had that was not a small thing that happened to him. And it just sort of, once Veronica is sort of taken out of that moment, it's like Wallace totally ceases to exist until he's needed to be called up into the next episode. And regarding their breakup, her and Logan, I really also love that they had her acting like she was totally okay. And everybody can sort of see she's not really, but she's so unwilling to show how she feels to anybody. And we get that moment of her breaking down in the shower. And that was just so relatable. I know that you guys don't believe me, probably, because I burst into tears on Unspoiled all the time. However, a lot of that is because I feel a safety in the distance. I'm here by myself in a room where there's nobody around. And yes, you're watching and interacting, but it doesn't feel like I'm putting anybody on the spot with my emotional reaction. I'm not demanding anything of anyone. And I am reacting to something that I'm reading or watching, which feels removed enough from me that it's less dangerous and makes me feel a little bit less vulnerable. However, in life, I do not like to cry in front of people in life at all. I abhor it. The only person that I have cried in front of in the last 10 years is Owen and Brendan, my ex-husband and my future husband. That's it. Other than that, I will lock that shit down so hard. And I will wait until any moment when I'm by myself to let it out. But I am not doing that shit in front of anybody. I don't want to. I don't want that kind of support. A lot of people seem to think be there for your friend while they cry. No, don't be there. Let me be alone, please. Let me lose it in privacy. I am not interested in a public display of emotion to let somebody else know, oh, I'm having the appropriate response that I should be having that you expect me to have. No, thank you. So the fact that she, even to her father, who we know she has a really close relationship with, but the thing is, Veronica doesn't want to need people. This is another aspect of that. And she doesn't want to demand time, especially from her dad when he's got shit to do. He's got a mission he's on. She is like me in that she doesn't want to inconvenience people for the sake of something that feels really ultimately probably it shouldn't be as big a deal as it is. Regardless how she actually feels, that it feels like a big deal. I'm sure she tells herself it shouldn't be that big a deal. And when she suddenly starts crying in the shower, I just really that gut punched me because I found it weird we were watching a shower scene. It was just sort of really? What is this? And then once I realized what they were doing, I just kind of felt sick a little bit because it just was so familiar, And especially crying in the shower, there's an added layer of defensiveness to it because she could have gone into her room and started crying. But there's a little bit too much risk in that, too, because her dad might have forgotten his keys, come home, hear her. You're in the shower. The water's running. The door's locked. Nobody's getting in there to check on you. Nobody's accidentally hearing you through the walls, through the window. There is no danger of anybody knowing what you're up to. And all of it gets washed away. So you can come out with red eyes a little bit, but I got soap in my eyes. Whatever. You could say whatever. It's very, very perfect for people who don't want to let other folks know that they're suffering, So yeah, I really rather like that. So let's talk about, now that I think I've got, 15 minutes left. Let's talk about the dean. What is his name again? If anybody wants to help me out. So there's this moment at the beginning of the episode where this fucking like mobster comes in, who's apparently a alumnus. He's an alumnus, right? That's the singular of the school. And he is putting a lot of pressure on the dean to reopen the fraternity houses. Because when the episode opens, all of the Lilith House girls are celebrating the fact that the frat houses are being disbanded. Apparently, that vote went through, and what is her name? Hearst, Patty Hearst, her vote. She agreed to take them apart. But this dude comes in and leans on the dean, and I guess that he threatens to stop donating, if I'm not mistaken, is what he says. He must donate a lot to have this kind of sway. But the dean goes into the recording booth on Piz's show, where he has a couple of Christian students who are upset at the fact that their application to turn a fraternity house into like a Christian student house was rejected. And the dean busts in and announces that he has been given the final vote, because it turns out that one of the people who made the vote, and I don't remember if it was Patty Hearst herself or not, but one of the deciding votes, it turns out they own the property that the frat houses are on, or they own the houses. So that sort of insinuates that they have a vested interest in how the vote goes, and therefore they should have recused themselves. And they didn't. So now he gets to have the deciding vote, and he decides to keep the frat houses. And this means, of course, that the Lilith House girls are all super pissed at him. So one of them steps in front of his minivan that he has to take for the weekend and keeps him from being able to pull forward any farther. And they gang up on him and egg his car. And I think we're supposed to believe it's possible they were like setting him up to be hurt later on in the episode, because they're egging his window, his office window, and he's walking towards that, which is what distracts him from noticing that somebody else has come into the room. I do not think they had anything to do with it. If they do, I think that's going to be ridiculous. So I'm just going to say, I don't think they had anything to do with his murder. And I'm sure they're going to be under suspicion, and it's going to be silly. But they didn't. I am going on record with no evidence of any kind whatsoever. I'm going on record and saying I think it was a secretary. And I have, again, no evidence at all. The only reason that I am saying that is because of the attitude that he had with the person who came in. He doesn't seem like, what are you doing here? In the way that you would with somebody that you were upset with, like his wife, who he just found out is cheating, or the professor that he had just found out she was cheating with. Maybe it was him. I mean, he's the guy who set up the perfect murder. You know, he's got lots of papers coming in, with people explaining how they would pull off the perfect murder. So maybe it was him. I think it's going to be something like very unrelated that we wouldn't know about with any of the information that we have at our disposal yet. And because of the way he said, what are you doing here? It was sort of like you got off hours ago. Why are you back? It was not personal. It felt like, I know you, but I don't really have any sort of emotional reaction to you being here. And that's why I thought it was her. That's the only reason I think that. There is literally not a shred of anything else to support it. That's literally it. So, wildest guess I could possibly make, and I am fully aware of that. It's fine. I did like Dean Odell. Thank you, Ariel. And I did really like the way that this works out with Veronica sharing information with her dad, because her dad doesn't tell her why he's going to, I can't even remember what town it is, but it's like, he tells her very specifically, I'm going to like Palm Springs because somebody thinks their wife is cheating and she supposedly got some sort of like event going on there and I'm going to follow her. And the dean thinks that she's having an affair. I really love he tells Keith the reason that he thinks that is she doesn't kiss him the same way anymore. And I love in the scene where she is there with the dean and he's on his couch. She kisses him and pulls away from him. And you can see on his face, his whole face falls. And he gets it back an instant later because she starts teasing him about the car. But I really read that in the moment. I was like, ooh, he got a look on his face. What was that? And then it was gone and I kind of forgot about it. And then when he goes and talks to Keith later and he's like, she's not kissing me the same way. I know it sounds ridiculous, but I was like, ooh, that was why that expression was there. I caught that. And I really love when there is something that's fleeting like that an actor did that winds up like paying off later that you didn't even realize mattered, you know? So Keith goes and investigates because he has this particular dude in mind that he thinks she might be cheating with. And it turns out that dude is gay and his wife is not sleeping with that guy. And the dean is so pleased and he's like about to go home and do something special for her to celebrate. And because he feels guilty, he ever even suspected anything. And we find out that Veronica finds out that the guy or the person that her dad was investigating was the dean's wife. And I wondered if she was just going to keep that, like, try and be cute about how she gave him that information and keep it to herself initially. I was really glad that she just busts out with, oh, Dad, she's fucking this guy. She's very direct and very specific and like, oh yeah, I know. This is the name that he goes by. This is the hotel that they go to. I caught them at this day and this time and what room. She tells him everything. And I was just like so relieved by that. So she tells her dad. He immediately is like, fuck, because he was so glad he got to deliver some like good news to somebody for a change. And now he has to go back and be like, okay, actually, it wasn't who you thought, but it is what you thought. And he hangs out with the dean while he gets drunk. And he sort of like double checks and is like, you're not going to drive or anything tonight, right? And the dean's like, no. And then Keith leaves and the dean goes into his drawer and I'm thinking, oh my God, is he going to drive and hit somebody and there's going to be some scandal about him being drunk? And then he pulls a fucking gun out and I was like, oh my God, what? I thought he was going to have murdered somebody for sure. Again, guys, I wasn't thinking things through entirely. He pulls his gun out and I'm like, oh word. We go to the hotel room with his wife and the professor in it, being all cute. A knock on the door. Should I have thought the dean's at the door? I should have. I did not. When she opens the door, I was just like, oh no. Like, I didn't even think. And he's just like, can I come in? And honestly, what a fucking power move, honestly. Like, he doesn't have his gun out either. He isn't here threatening them. He's just at the door like, hey, bitches. I bet you two fucks thought you had me fucking snowed. And I really liked it. He just walks on in and is just like, oh, I bet your dick's still wet, ain't it? Like, just so in their face about it. So when it cuts back to him at the office again, and he's asleep on the couch. Is he even asleep? I think he is. And the eggs hitting the window wake him up, if I'm not mistaken. I was like, before the eggs wake him up, I'm thinking, did he just like murder their asses and then go right back to his damn office? Because if he murdered the two of them, he needs to go to another country. He needs to get the fuck out. Like, you don't kill them that you have a clear grievance against, that it is known you have a grievance against, and then just hang out in your office afterwards because everybody's going to assume it was you. You're the first suspect. But I couldn't figure it out. Like, well, what's the whole thing with setting it up with the gun? Why did he have that? Then the eggs begin to hit the window. And then he turns around and says, "What are you doing here?" And it's not like he says, "What are you doing here?" And all of a sudden we see a hand go up with a gun and we hear a shot and his body hits the floor. That's not how it goes. He says, "What are you doing here?" And I think it cuts. And then we just see Weevil at the very end of the episode going into his office because he's going to set up some like high def thing. And he finds the dean seated at his desk with the bullet hole in his temple in what I believe is like an attempt to make it look like a suicide. Which, I mean, if the guy has just found out that that he's being cheated on, and more people than just Keith are aware of that, maybe some people might believe, oh yeah, maybe he just like decided to end it all because he was so grieved at the fact that she did this to him. But he went to this hotel. There has to be video footage of the fact that he didn't just like stay at his office all night. And I am really curious about how the person who killed him managed to get him in the temple in this very neat way without apparently him putting up a struggle, because it looks like a very clean through the temple wound. He's seated at his desk in this way that feels like extremely organized and straightforward. If I hadn't seen him react to the person come in, I might have thought somebody drugged him and then shot him. Like they arranged his body and then shot him, and it was, they could make it be like, oh, he was drunk. I guess a toxicology report would show that he was drugged. I'm just very curious about the logistics in setting this up. And this is all assuming that this person is trying to make it look like he killed himself because of the way the scene looked in that one instant that we saw when Weevil walks in. But that might not be what they're trying to do. It might be really clear this is a murder scene and not a suicide scene. And also, I am dying of curiosity on what his wife and the professor are doing. Assuming that neither of them did it, which I can't assume. But the idea that, like, what other motive is there? Could there... I don't know. I just don't want to believe it's any of the Lilith girls because it's just so, like, over the top to me. But, and especially because the main problem that these women have with him is that he reinstated the fraternity system, which, like, now that we know it was Mercer, it was nobody in the frats. They don't know that, but they are angry at the frats for a whole other separate thing. So I am assuming they are aware it's not necessarily the frats and they don't care. I don't think it was about that, really. There's just this sort of attitude that, like, we disband the frats and suddenly misogyny ceases to exist. And it's sort of absurdly naive. Like, you don't necessarily, like, these dudes being all together in these houses that sort of feed on each other. I can understand how that could make it worse, but they don't need to be set up in frat houses to rape and abuse and be shitty. So the idea that disbanding the frats will eliminate all of this sort of behavior is absolutely ridiculous to me. And the idea that they're buying into that so hard, it doesn't jive with, like, the understanding of the situation. The idea that the professor killed him I don't know why he would, is the main thing. I don't get the impression that he's in love with the man's wife. Even if he were, this isn't the way to get her. It's going to look bad. And I think that the professor has to know that Veronica's aware that he was having it. Maybe he doesn't know that she knows. I think he does, though. So he would have to know that she is going to share that information and people are going to be looking at him. I don't think it's either of them. I wonder. I don't know. I think it was a secretary. No good reason. Right. Ariel says he knew she knew they had a conversation about. That's right, because he gives her that, like, he says he's going to write her a recommendation, and she thinks it's him trying to buy her off, and then she's like, he tells her that's not what it is. So yeah, I don't think that it would be him, because he knows that motive is just too fucking easy. Like, he wouldn't do that. I don't know. If it was his wife, like, I see that even less. I mean, it doesn't seem like she harbored any real ill will. I think she was just fucking around with a hot guy. I'm pretty sure that this is going to land her in such hot water, she wouldn't risk it either. I don't know. I really don't. I got nothing. Is it that mobster from the beginning of the episode? He did what the mobster asked. There's no reason. Yeah. Anyway, so that's the end of the episode. I think that I covered pretty much everything. Rachel says, I like hearing the speculation. Yeah, this is me. I get this way with Rashawn when she's at the end of Dresden Files trying to guess something. Somebody got murdered, and she's trying to figure out who the hell could have done it, and it's been really fun. Yeah, I don't know. I feel real bad for Weevil being the one to walk in on this, because I feel like that's going to be bad for Weevil too. And it shouldn't be. People should know he has nothing to fucking do with it. But Weevil's got a record, man, and just, he's in the wrong place at the wrong time, and I just feel like that never goes well, you know? So I'm worried for him too. Anyway, all right, I'm going to wrap up. Thank you guys again so much for hanging out with me. And thank you to Agnes for commissioning this episode. I don't think she was in the chat tonight at all, was she? No, she wasn't. It was just Ariel and Rachel. Thank you to Ariel and Rachel for feeding me people's names and information that I didn't remember or know. And I'll be seeing y'all again pretty soon, I think, with a new episode. Until then, toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.